Have you ever felt the crushing weight of darkness closing in around you, the desperate need to take just one more breath? I have. The memory of that day still sends shivers through my tiny black body, even now as I lay here, safe and warm. It started like any other morning in the bustling streets of the city, where I was just another stray kitten, trying to survive. The air was thick with the scent of car exhaust and street food that morning. My sensitive whiskers picked up every subtle change in the wind, while my ears twitched at the constant symphony of footsteps, voices, and rumbling engines. The concrete beneath my paws was still cool from the night before, but I could feel it slowly warming as the sun climbed higher. I hadn't eaten in what felt like forever, my stomach cramping painfully as I searched for anything edible in the narrow alley I called home. The dumpsters that usually provided my meals had been emptied the day before, leaving me with nothing but the lingering scent of what once was. My tiny frame, already too thin for a kitten my age, felt weaker with each passing hour. The sound of approaching footsteps made my ears perk up instantly. Usually, I would hide. Humans weren't always kind to strays like me. But hunger had made me desperate, and something about these footsteps seemed different. They were slower, more deliberate, as if searching for something, or someone. I should have trusted my instincts when I felt that first twinge of unease. The way the shadows seemed to stretch a little longer, how the usual morning sounds suddenly felt muted and distant. But hunger can make you ignore even the most obvious warning signs, and I was so very, very hungry. From my hiding spot behind a cardboard box, I watched as a pair of worn boots came into view. They stopped just a few feet away, and a sweet smell wafted toward me, the unmistakable scent of tuna. My mouth watered instantly, and before I could stop myself, I had taken a step forward, then another. The humans' movements were gentle at first, coaxing and careful as they placed the food on the ground. I should have noticed how their eyes never held any warmth, how their fingers twitched with barely contained anticipation. But all I could focus on was the promise of a meal, my first real food in days. As I crept closer, I could hear my heart pounding in my tiny chest, each beat a warning I chose to ignore. The tuna was right there, just a few more steps. I told myself I could grab it quickly and run. I was small but fast, and I knew these alleys better than anyone. Looking back, I wish I had seen the second human approaching from behind. Maybe then I could have darted away in time, found safety in one of the many hiding spots I knew so well. But I was young, hungry, and foolishly hopeful that maybe, just maybe, these humans were actually kind. The moment I reached the food, everything happened so fast. Rough hands grabbed me from behind, squeezing too tight around my middle. I yowled in terror and tried to scratch, to bite, to escape, but it was useless. More hands were there, shoving me into something dark and confining. I could smell the plastic all around me, feel it pressing against my fur as they sealed me inside what I would later learn was a bag. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst, and my lungs burned as I tried to cry out for help. But who would hear a tiny black kitten in a city that had already forgotten so many like me? Through the plastic, I could hear their laughter, feel the swing of motion as they carried me away from my alley. Each step took me further from everything I knew, every bounce making my stomach lurch with fear. I tried to stay still, to conserve my energy, but panic was taking over. The sounds around me changed. The echo of footsteps on concrete became hollow, and I could hear water flowing nearby. The realization of where they were taking me hit like a bolt of lightning. I had seen the river before, from a safe distance, watching its dark waters rush past with a mixture of fear and fascination. I started fighting again with renewed desperation, claws searching for any weakness in my plastic prison. The bag swung wildly as I thrashed, but it was no use. I could hear them laughing again, their voices growing louder as they neared their destination. The last thing I remember before the world tilted was the sound of rushing water getting closer and closer. Then came the sensation of flying through the air, followed by the shocking cold as the bag hit the water. In that moment, as the river began to pull me under, I knew I had to make a choice. Give up or fight harder than I ever had before. Through the terror and the cold, something deep inside me awakened, a fierce determination to live. I may have been small, But in that moment, I discovered just how strong a tiny black kitten could be. With the water rising around me and precious seconds ticking away, I made my decision. It was time to fight. The next few moments would determine everything: my past, my future, my very existence. But that's the thing about moments of true desperation. They either break you completely or reveal strengths you never knew you had. As the current pulled me deeper into its cold embrace, I was about to discover which one it would be for me. I could feel the water beginning to seep through small holes in the bag, turning my world even colder and darker. Each breath became more precious than the last as the space around me grew smaller and smaller. But something inside me refused to give up, refused to let this be my ending. What happened next would change my life forever, testing every instinct and ounce of strength in my small body. But to understand how I survived, you need to know just how far I was willing to go to stay alive. Because sometimes, when death is reaching for you with cold fingers, the only choice is to bite back with everything you have. The water was rising faster now, and I knew I had only moments left to act. The current was getting stronger, pulling me deeper into the river's embrace. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet, not like this. What happened next would prove that even the smallest of creatures can possess the strongest will to live. The water was everywhere now, seeping through my fur and chilling me to the bone. Each breath became a desperate struggle as the plastic bag pressed against my face, the river's current spinning me in dizzying circles. I couldn't tell which way was up anymore. My world reduced to a cold, dark prison. My tiny lungs burned with the effort of breathing in the increasingly limited space. The taste of river water was bitter and frightening on my tongue, mixing with the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but there was nowhere to go in this suffocating darkness. The sound of the water was deafening, a constant roar that seemed to mock my desperate situation. Through the plastic, I could see distorted shapes of light and shadow, reminding me of a world I might never see again. The current pulled me deeper, each second dragging me further from any hope of rescue. I tried using my claws to tear at the bag, but the water made the plastic slick and difficult to grip. My movements became more frantic as I realized how little air remained. The space around me felt like it was shrinking, the bag conforming to my shape as the water pressure increased. The cold was the worst part. It seemed to seep into my very bones, making my movements slower and more difficult. My tiny body trembled uncontrollably, using precious energy I couldn't afford to waste. But I couldn't stop shivering, couldn't stop fighting, even as exhaustion began to set in. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that watery darkness. Had it been seconds? Minutes? I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was the burning in my lungs, the increasing pressure in my chest as my body screamed for fresh air. The river tumbled me over and over, disorienting me further. My thoughts became fuzzy around the edges as the lack of oxygen began to affect me. Memories flashed through my mind, the warm sun on my fur, the taste of my last meal, the simple joy of stretching out in a patch of light. Would those be my last memories? Would anyone even notice I was gone? The panic that had been building finally exploded inside me, sending me into a frenzy of movement. I thrashed wildly, my claws scrabbling against the unyielding plastic. In my desperation, I began to bite at anything I could reach, my sharp kitten teeth seeking any weakness in my prison. The water was up to my neck now, leaving just a tiny pocket of air at the top of the bag. Each breath was shallow and quick, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The cold made my muscles ache, but I forced myself to keep moving, keep fighting, even as hope began to fade. I could feel my strength ebbing away with each passing moment. The weight of the water pressed against me from all sides, making every movement a monumental effort. My vision began to blur, dark spots dancing at the edges of my consciousness. Was this how it would end? My body felt impossibly heavy, yet somehow weightless at the same time. The river's current seemed to be slowing, or maybe that was just my perception changing as my oxygen-starved brain struggled to process what was happening. The urge to close my eyes, to give in to the exhaustion, was almost overwhelming. Yet something deep inside me refused to surrender. A primal spark of survival flared brighter as darkness threatened to overtake me. With the last of my strength, I focused all my remaining energy on one desperate act. I bit down on the plastic with every ounce of force my tiny jaws could muster. The taste of plastic filled my mouth as I gnawed frantically at the bag. My teeth felt like they might break from the pressure, but I kept biting, driven by pure instinct and the desperate need to live. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I worked, each second bringing me closer to either salvation or surrender. The sound of rushing water grew louder, indicating I was approaching rapids or perhaps a waterfall. The thought sent a new surge of terror through my exhausted body. If I didn't break free soon, the increased turbulence would surely be the end of me. My jaws ached from the effort, but I refused to stop biting. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, something changed. Was that a give in the plastic? A weakness where my teeth had been working? Hope flared briefly, giving me a final burst of energy. I redoubled my efforts, focusing all my remaining strength on that one spot. The moment the first hole appeared, it felt like a miracle. Water rushed in faster, but so did a precious burst of fresh air. The hole was tiny, barely big enough for my nose, but it was enough to give me the second wind I desperately needed. With renewed determination, I worked to make it bigger. Progress was agonizingly slow, each tear in the plastic hard-won with my aching teeth and claws. The current continued to pull me along, making it difficult to maintain my grip on the slowly widening hole. But now that I had a taste of freedom, nothing would stop me from fighting for it. The bag finally gave way with a sound that was lost to the river's roar. The sudden rush of water nearly overwhelmed me, but instinct took over. My legs began to kick automatically, fighting against the current as I clawed my way toward what I hoped was the surface. My lungs felt ready to burst. Through the murky water, I could see light above me, or at least I thought it was above. Everything was confusing, disorienting, but that light became my focal point, my guide to survival. With the last of my strength, I swam toward it, praying my tiny body would hold out just a few seconds longer. The moment my head broke the surface was the sweetest of my life. Air rushed into my burning lungs as I gasped and sputtered, my legs working frantically to keep me afloat. The current was still strong, but I was free from the plastic death trap. Now I just had to figure out how to get to shore before my strength gave out completely. Breaking free from the bag was only the beginning of my fight for survival. The river's current swept me along mercilessly, my tiny body barely staying above the churning water. Each breath was a victory, though river water filled my mouth with every gasp for air. My waterlogged fur felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, dragging me down despite my desperate paddling. The shore seemed impossibly far away, a blur of green and brown that kept moving past me as the current carried me downstream. My legs burned with exhaustion, but stopping wasn't an option. Through the spray of water, I caught glimpses of debris floating nearby, branches, leaves, and other things the river had claimed. My survival instinct kicked in, and I realized these might be my only chance. If I could just reach something solid, something that could help me stay afloat, I might have a fighting chance. A large branch swept past, tantalizing close but just out of reach. I pushed myself harder, my little legs kicking with renewed determination. The next piece of debris that came near, a partially submerged log, I managed to grab with my claws, holding on with every ounce of strength I had left. The log spun and rolled in the current, but it was something solid to cling to, and that was all that mattered. My claws dug deep into the soft, waterlogged wood as I pulled myself further up, finally getting my head completely clear of the water. For the first time since being thrown in, I could take full breaths. From my slightly elevated position, I could better see the riverbank passing by. The current was still strong, but the log was gradually being pushed closer to one side of the river. Hope flickered in my chest. If we got close enough to the bank, maybe I could make a swim for it. My whole body trembled with exhaustion and cold, but I forced myself to stay alert, watching for any opportunity to reach safety. The sound of rushing water grew louder ahead, and my heart nearly stopped. Rapids were coming, and I knew my makeshift raft might not survive them. Time seemed to slow as I approached the rapids. The log began to bounce and shake as it hit the first rough patches of water. I could see rocks ahead, dark and menacing, breaking the surface of the churning river. One wrong move, one slip of my claws, and it would all be over. Just before we hit the worst of the rapids, I noticed something. A low-hanging branch from a tree on the riverbank, extending out over the water. The current was pushing my log closer to that side, and if I timed it just right, but it would mean letting go of my safe haven and trusting in one desperate leap. In that moment, as I watched the branch getting closer, I made my decision. I had already survived being sealed in a bag and thrown into the river. I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. I gathered my remaining strength, tensing my muscles for what might be my last chance at survival. The branch was almost within reach now. I could see the rough bark, the smaller twigs branching off. It looked solid enough to hold my weight, if I could just reach it. The roar of the rapids grew louder behind me, adding urgency to my decision. It was now or never. With a yowl that surprised even me, I launched myself from the log toward the branch. Time seemed to stop as I flew through the air, my front paws stretched out as far as they would go. The distance looked impossibly far, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I had made a fatal mistake. Then my claws connected with bark, scraping and scrambling for purchase. My back legs swung wildly in the air as I fought to pull myself up, the branch swaying dangerously under my weight. But I had done it. I had made the jump. Now I just had to hold on and somehow make it to solid ground. Inch by painful inch, I dragged myself along the branch toward the trunk of the tree. My muscles screamed in protest, and my waterlogged fur made me even heavier. But the memory of the plastic bag and the dark water gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. Finally reaching the tree trunk, I found myself facing a new challenge, climbing down. The bark was rough enough to give my claws good grip, but my exhaustion made every movement dangerous. One wrong step, one slip, and I would fall right back into the river's cruel embrace. Slowly, carefully, I made my way down the trunk, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. The sound of the rapids felt more distant now, but I couldn't relax yet. Not until my paws touched solid ground. Not until I was completely free of the river's reach. When my paws finally touched earth, my legs nearly gave out from relief and exhaustion. But I forced myself to stumble further up the bank, away from the water's edge. Only when I was several feet from the riverbank did I allow myself to collapse, my whole body shaking. I lay there for what felt like hours, simply breathing and feeling the solid ground beneath me. My fur was matted and dripping, my muscles ached like never before, but I was alive. Against all odds, this tiny black kitten had fought the river and won. The sun's warmth slowly began to seep into my fur, chasing away some of the bone-deep chill. As my breathing steadied and my heart rate began to normalize, I became aware of new sounds around me. Birds singing, leaves rustling in the breeze, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. As I lay there recovering, I realized something had changed inside me. The terrified kitten who had been so easily lured by a piece of tuna was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had stared death in the face and refused to blink. But my journey wasn't over yet. I still had to figure out what to do next. As I lay on the riverbank, the world slowly came back into focus. My fur was beginning to dry in patches, though I still looked more like a drowned rat than a cat. Every muscle in my tiny body ached, reminding me of the incredible fight for survival I had just won. The sun had moved higher in the sky, its warmth becoming a gentle comfort rather than just a way to dry off. I had no idea how far downstream the river had carried me. Everything looked different from my usual territory. The trees were taller here, the grass thicker, and the sounds of the city felt distant. After what felt like hours, I managed to find the strength to sit up. My legs were still shaky, but the rest had done me good. I began the careful process of grooming myself, an instinctive behavior that helped calm my frayed nerves. Each lick of my fur brought me more fully back to myself. A new sound caught my attention. Voices, human voices, coming from somewhere nearby. My first instinct was to run, to hide, but my body wasn't ready for quick movements yet. Besides, something about these voices was different from the cruel laughter I'd heard earlier. They sounded concerned. Then I saw them. Two humans walking along a path I hadn't noticed before. They were moving slowly, looking around as if searching for something. In my exhausted state, I couldn't muster the energy to flee, so I watched them warily, ready to use whatever strength I had left if they proved dangerous. To my surprise, when they spotted me, their reactions weren't what I expected. The smaller human, a female I think, made a soft, sympathetic sound. She knelt down, keeping her distance, and spoke in gentle tones that somehow made me want to listen rather than run away. The other human, a male with kind eyes, stayed back, letting his companion take the lead. She was holding something that made my nose twitch, the smell of food, real food, not like the deceptive tuna from earlier. My stomach reminded me that I hadn't eaten in what felt like forever. Cautiously, so cautiously, I watched as she placed some food on the ground and backed away. Every instinct told me to be suspicious, to remember the lesson I'd just learned about trusting humans. But something was different here. There was no grabbing, no sudden movements, just patience. After what seemed like an eternity of internal debate, hunger won out over fear. I took a tentative step forward, then another, my eyes never leaving the humans as I approached the food. They remained still, speaking in those same soft, encouraging tones. The food was better than anything I'd tasted before. Some kind of meat that melted in my mouth. As I ate, I realized the humans hadn't moved any closer. They were just watching, waiting, letting me make my own choices. It was so different from my earlier experience that I found myself relaxing slightly. When I finished eating, the female human slowly extended her hand, palm up, letting me catch her scent. There was no threat in the gesture, no attempt to grab or force, just an invitation, one I could accept or refuse as I chose. To my own surprise, I found myself taking a small step forward. Her hand was warm when I finally gathered the courage to sniff it, and she smelled like sunshine and something sweet. When she gently scratched behind my ear, I couldn't help but lean into her touch. After the cold darkness of the river, her warmth felt like a miracle. The male human approached then, moving slowly and speaking in the same gentle tones. He was holding something soft, a towel, I would later learn, and with movements that telegraphed every intention, he carefully wrapped it around my still damp body. The warmth was immediate and wonderful. I didn't protest when the female human carefully picked me up, towel and all. Something told me these humans were different from the others. These were helpers, healers, the kind of humans I'd heard other strays talk about, but had never met myself. They took me to a place that smelled of other animals and medicine, a veterinary clinic, though I didn't know that term then. The humans there were gentle as they examined me, treating my scrapes and checking for more serious injuries. Throughout it all, the two humans who found me stayed nearby. What followed were days of recovery, both physical and emotional. I learned that the humans who found me worked with a rescue organization, helping animals like me who had nowhere else to go. They called me River, a name that reminded me not of the terror I'd survived, but of my own strength. As my body healed, I discovered that not all humans were cruel. The ones at the clinic, and especially the two who found me, showed me a different side of humanity. One filled with compassion, patience, and genuine care. Each day brought new experiences that helped erase the trauma of that terrible morning. The female human, I came to know her as Sarah, visited me every day. She would sit with me for hours, sometimes just talking softly, other times offering gentle pets and treats. Gradually, I found myself looking forward to her visits, my fear of humans slowly being replaced by trust. When I was finally well enough to leave the clinic, Sarah took me to her home. It was nothing like the alley I'd known before. This place was warm, safe, and filled with comfortable spots to sleep. There were no dark bags, no rushing water, just peace and security. The transformation from terrified stray to beloved pet wasn't immediate, but it was profound. Each day brought new discoveries, the joy of playing with toys, the comfort of a soft bed, the security of regular meals. But more importantly, I learned that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Now, as I lay here in my favorite sunbeam by Sarah's window, I often think back to that terrifying day in the river. The memory no longer holds the same power over me. Instead, it reminds me of the strength I found within myself when I needed it most. My fur has grown long and sleek, no trace remaining of the bedraggled kitten who fought her way out of that plastic bag. The regular meals and loving care have transformed me into a healthy, confident cat. But the biggest changes aren't the ones you can see from the outside. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the rain taps against the windows, I remember the sound of rushing water. But now, instead of fear, I feel pride in knowing I survived. Each drop of rain is a reminder that I chose to fight when giving up would have been easier. Sarah never knew the full story of what happened to me that day, though I think she suspected. The way she would gently comfort me during thunderstorms, her patience when I was initially terrified of water bowls, she seemed to understand that I had been through something terrible. My life now is filled with simple pleasures I once thought impossible. The warmth of Sarah's lap as she reads in her favorite chair, the thrill of chasing toy mice across wooden floors, the security of knowing I'll never have to scrounge for food again. Each moment is a gift I don't take for granted. Other cats have joined our family over time. More rescues, each with their own stories of survival. I watch Sarah show them the same patience and love she showed me. And I see them slowly bloom under her care, just as I did. We're all survivors here in our own ways. People who visit often comment on how unusual I am for a cat, how I seem to understand things on a deeper level, how I show compassion to the new rescues who arrive scared and defensive. What they don't realize is that surviving the river taught me more than just how to fight. It taught me how to live. I'll never know what happened to the humans who tried to end my life that day. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about the tiny black kitten they threw away, if they ever question their actions. But I don't dwell on these thoughts. They're part of a past I've moved beyond. Instead, I focus on my role in my new family. When Sarah brings home another rescue, I'm often the first to approach them, to show them that trust is possible, that healing can happen. My story becomes their hope, my strength, their inspiration. My journey from that dark bag to this warm home wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation. Every day, I choose to remember not the cruelty that put me in the river, but the strength that got me out. And in doing so, I become more than just a survivor. I become a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and love.